Thanks for being here, Dr. Cucchiara.
You're welcome. So happy to be here.
So let's start off. I'd love for you to explain what the difference is between an ND, such as yourself, and an MD.
Okay, that's an actual great question. And I'm happy that you started off with that because that's the biggest confusion as to what a naturopathic doctor, which is what an ND is, and what a medical doctor, which is an MD, right? So the main difference is there are about 6 accredited naturopathic medical schools in the country, meaning that they're training you as a primary care physician. The curriculum is a little bit different. However, we're still learning all of the same basic sciences that a medical doctor does learn. So we do learn pathology, microbiology, pharmacology, which is the use of obviously pharmaceuticals, lab diagnosis, immunology. So all of those basic sciences we do have training in. We also are trained to be a primary care physician, meaning that we can run labs, we can do physical exams, check your thyroid, your heart, your lungs, etc. However, every state differs, and I'll talk about that in a moment as to where a naturopath can do that legally. So we do go to 4 years of medical school, just like the medical doctor does. However, the last 2 years of medical school, because the program is different, we learn all of the naturopathic healing modalities. So what those are would be things like learning nutrition. So how can food heal you? Herbal medicine. So other name for that is botanical medicine, homeopathy, Chinese medicine principles. We learn the medicinal system of India, which is Ayurveda, hydrotherapy. I can go into what these mean later on. However, these are the type of things that we learn in addition to all the basic sciences. So then when we come out of school, we not only know what the Western doctor knows, the MD knows, but we also know all of these healing modalities that we can help our patients with. And then that brings to, and it might be a good way to segment into when can we do this and where, like what type of states allow for what. So there's approximately, I think about 22 licensed naturopathic states in the country. We are climbing. It's basically how chiropractic used to be, where it wasn't very well known. And then eventually it just became mainstream. So the state of New York doesn't license a naturopathic doctor, meaning that you cannot do certain modalities that a medical doctor can do. So in the state of New York, you wouldn't be able to do a physical exam or run your own labs. However, other states like Connecticut, which I'm licensed in, we can run our own labs, we can do physical exams. And then there's other states that are even more of a wide scope. So where I went to school was in Arizona, and you have a full scope of practice there. So they can do everything a medical doctor can do. They can remove a stitch if you need them to, remove a mole. They could do physical exams. They can give you an IV. So they have a full scope. So although New York has a little bit more strict guidelines on what I can do, having a Connecticut license does help, as well as then I get around and I have some other doctors to help me with some of the things that New York wouldn't allow me to do. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. So in Arizona, you could potentially have a naturopathic doctor as your main doctor who can do pretty much
Yes.
everything. But in New York, you're probably going to need a regular MD as your primary physician and then go to see a naturopathic doctor just sort of in addition.
Exactly. So most of my patients have their primary care who does their physical exams, which I think it's best anyway, to be honest. Even if I didn't have this restriction, I think it's better because then we're able to focus 1 hour at least on the patient's concerns. So they'll just go get their physical from their primary care. And then I usually send them with a list of labs that are very thorough to either bring to their primary care, or I have, certain doctors who will run all of those labs for me here. However, in Arizona or California or Portland, Oregon, Vermont, literally they can be your primary care. So you would have to, the best way is to contact the AANP, American Association of Naturopathic Physicians. They will list all types of, all the naturopathic doctors in different states, and you can kind of figure out, okay, if this is a licensed state, you can ask your doctor, okay, can you be my primary care too? And then they're the one-stop shop.
Got it. Okay. So then let's say that I am actually coming to see you. I was going to say, let's say someone's coming to see you.
Yeah,
I'm going to see you next week.
I know. Excited.
I'm excited too. So, but can you share a little bit? Because I think right now, like when I go to my primary physician, you usually go in, whether it's for a physical or you have some sort of complaint, you have maybe 15 minutes. I mean, physical a little bit longer, right?
Exactly.
But you have 15 minutes to say whatever you need to say. They'll barely look at you.
Correct. Correct.
And then they walk out and like, have a nice day. See you next year.
Yes.
So I feel like that's the experience most people have in a regular physician's office. Exactly. When they come to, or when someone goes to see a naturopathic doctor, what is that experience like?
It's literally the complete opposite. This is the best way to start this, because I had a patient the other day. She was talking and in our first visit, and she said to me, am I talking too much? And I said, no, what do you mean? She's like, oh, I don't know. I'm just not used to, I guess, having the space to talk to their doctor. And, many of us can really relate to that. And I even, I had to see a neurologist a few months ago. I was in the office for the waiting room, probably, say 30 minutes. And then the appointment was no longer than 5. So that's the big difference, is that the time we spend and why it's so important. So the first visit is at least an hour. Depending on the complexity of the patient's case, I will book out more time, but it's at least 1 hour. So we're literally going through everything. So the best way for me to do it, so this is will prepare you for your visit, is that you go through a chronological order of the person's life. Now, not every naturopath does that. Like we're all, we're naturopaths, but we're all different, right? But I particularly go through like a chronological order. So I kind of start from you being a baby. Okay, were you a C-section baby? Were you breastfed? Like what infections did you have as a child? How did you present? Were there any emotional traumas? Was there any physical traumas? Like all things that could have set you up for we call it dis-ease that occurred later in life. Like, was there an autoimmune disease that developed? Okay, so if I go back to square one, I can basically see an idea with a thorough history of what went wrong and why.
Yeah, it sounds much more thorough than a regular doctor's appointment. And I can tell you, I had to fill out a mountain of paperwork before I even went, which I really appreciate actually, because you're asking me questions that are going to help you figure out maybe what's going on. And you're really looking at a wider scope of the person. You're not looking at just like, okay, you have some bump here, and just trying to treat the bump. You're trying to go to the root cause. Yeah.
Exactly.
So now I know a little bit of your backstory, and if I remember correctly, you didn't grow up wanting to be a naturopathic doctor.
No,
right?
Not at all. Not even a percentage. And there was students in naturopathic school who would be like, oh, I've dreamed of being a doctor since I was a baby. And I was like, well, I didn't. So that part of me, it makes it really relatable to my patients now, because I wasn't always into this. So just as a little backstory, I went to St. John's University, which was a university in Queens, New York, and I was a business major there. So I graduated with a BS in marketing and advertising. I was creative, however, and I thought I loved it. And then I kind of went into the typical advertising realm in New York City, working in media agencies and ad agencies. And it was what I thought was my dream job. And it was really all I ever really wanted to do. And then, things got real really quick. And I realized there just wasn't a passion behind it as I really thought there was. And I remember at the time there was a girl who was in the elevator with me and she looked miserable. And I remember asking her, like, what's your deal? Basically, like, what's going on with you? And she had told me that she had signed up for this nutrition program, which you went to as well, Maria, right?
Integrative Nutrition.
Exactly. So she told me all about that. And I decided to do that because I've always had a love for nutrition, but I never thought I was going to be a doctor. So I ended up quitting my job, taking a huge leap of faith. I went to this nutrition school And at the time it was in person. So I had these amazing doctors and, Deepak and Andrew Weil and Mark Hyman teaching. And it was really inspiring. And I opened up my own mini health coaching business and I absolutely loved it. However, a lot of what I was doing was weight loss and detox. And I was so intrigued in this field of alternative medicine that I wanted to do more. So I ended up taking an even bigger leap of faith and moving across the country from New York City to Arizona to pursue naturopathic medicine. And I actually just moved back to New York 3 years ago. So it was not the typical doctor path that most people have.
Yeah, no, that's such a great story. And I think, it means even more when you've tried a couple things out and then decided on this path.
Exactly.
Yeah, because it's not like something like you felt like you had to do, growing up, like your parents made you do it or something like that.
Right,
yeah.
right. No.
It's, you really wanted to. And the fact that you chose naturopathic medicine versus conventional medicine also says a lot as well. So
absolutely. It's not something that people really know about. So that's when people say, like, do you love this? I'm like, I had to love this. I always say I literally left my state that, I was comfortable in to go to another state that I never lived to do a profession that people didn't really understand what it was. So you better be passionate about it.
Yeah.
If you're going to do that, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people, there is some misunderstanding of what a naturopathic doctor is. Like, is it a real doctor? People aren't sure. Is it like a woo-woo thing? Is it a real thing?
And that's a great question. What you just said is, are they a real doctor? Because this is something that's really important to know. If you do go to a naturopathic doctor, you have to make sure that they went to an accredited medical school. So there are some programs that will give you a certificate that you can get online and you are a naturopath. And that is not a doctor. If you want to go to a naturopath and they know alternative medicine and you're not going to doctor, that's fine. But if you think that this person is a doctor, they are not. So you have to make sure that you chose someone who went to one of the 6 schools in the United States, and then there's one in Canada, that are accredited. So we do go to a medical school that makes you different than, we're woo-woo, don't get me wrong. We still use science, but we're still, we always say, we joke around and say we're woo-woo, but we at least have a medical background. We know how to read a lab. We know how, obviously if we have prescription rights in certain states, we're actually writing a prescription. So we have to go to medical school for that. So that's a big distinguishing factor. So make sure if you want to go to a naturopath, you ask them where they went and you ask them if they are an actual doctor and they went to an accredited medical school.
Yeah.
That's important.
So it sounds like a naturopath is science-based, but open-minded.
Exactly.
Yes.
Science-based, but open-minded. Exactly.
So what are some of the common conditions that you think naturopathic medicine is especially well-suited to treat?
So the sky is honestly the limit with naturopathy, because I always say, if you're finding out what is actually wrong, you can help anything. My mentor always says every disease is curable, but not every person is. And you're like, And you think, because I can, there's diseases that can be cured, but not every person can be cured. Is there an emotional block? Is it just their fate that, we can't play God, right? So you have to come to the terms of, if there's a cause, you can fix it. So if that's what we're doing in naturopathic medicine, is we're finding the root cause. So if, for example, it could be any condition as benign as acne, right? So let's say I find out that, I do a food sensitivity panel and it's dairy that's causing acne, on top of, let's say we do their hormones and their estrogen is out of balance. So if we balance the estrogen and we change the diet, usually the person comes to cure. There are more complicated illnesses like autoimmune diseases, cancers, and such. But I've seen those also have a huge improvement with naturopathic medicine because, again, we're working on the cause. So just to name some conditions, people always ask me, do you specialize? And I thought I was going to specialize, but I honestly really like that I get a wide variety of different ailments that come to me, because then it keeps me on my toes. It keeps me researching. It keeps me talking to other doctors, because we all talk to each other all the time, share cases. So I'll just name some type of patient concerns that come to me. So I have a girl, the other day is trying to come off of birth control, has severe anxiety and depression. I have Hashimoto's. I have a Graves' disease patient, type 1 diabetic, a type 2 diabetic. I have a woman with bone cancer. I have another woman with lung cancer, celiac disease, arthritis. I mean, I can keep going. Just a lot of mental health disorders too, which is huge for especially my practice because I love to get into that type of stuff. But basically the scope is so wide as to what we can treat. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I guess it makes sense, right? Because if you're going through the same training as an MD with additional, more holistic therapies as well, then it makes sense that you can treat that wide range of issues.
Exactly.
So let's talk about some of the more innovative naturopathic therapies that you're not going to find in a traditional office.
Sure.
So let's start perhaps with ozone therapy. What exactly is this and why would someone use it?
Ozone is pretty amazing. So oxygen is O2 and then ozone is O3, just to give you an idea of what the difference is. It's basically very high oxygen. And so in the state of so for example, I wouldn't be able to administer it to someone in the state of New York. However, there are some medical doctors in New York. But when I wanted ozone for myself, when I was treating Lyme disease, I went back to Arizona to my friends and colleagues, and they administered ozone for me there because it's a lot cheaper in, some of those states than New York, just to keep in mind if you ever wanted to do that and make a vacation out of it. It is cheaper. And so what they do basically, and there's all different forms of ozone. So you can do ear ozone. You can do regular intravenous ozone. You can do, I had done in one of my colleagues' office, she even had some little wand that you put on your face and it would help, your sinuses. So there's all different types of ozone. And so what ozone is it's really, because you're highly oxygenating the blood, you're killing things and you're increasing the immune system. So it's wonderful for chronic viruses. So people who have Epstein-Barr, that just you can't lower their titers, cytomegalovirus, HHV6, all those chronic viruses that are linked to chronic fatigue and such. So that HIV, cancers, it's anti-inflammatory. So it's very antimicrobial, very anti-inflammatory, and it's immune boosting. So what the traditional ozone is that they basically take out your blood, and then now they take a certain amount out. They're not taking all of your blood. They take out a certain amount of your blood, and then they inject the blood basically an IV bag with ozone. And then they administer it back into your body. So you're basically getting the ozone put into the blood, and then your blood goes back in your body, but it's reoxygenated with ozone.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I actually first read about ozone therapy in The Truth About Cancer by Ty Bollinger. Have you read that?
I haven't, but I heard of the book. Yes.
Yeah, it's a great book. He talks about all sorts of alternative cancer therapies. And I mean, it seems to be pretty effective for a few different things. I know you used it personally as well.
Yes, I used it personally. I was undiagnosed with Lyme disease for probably 15 years. And through, the last 2 years of intensive treatment, that definitely was something that I did. And because I wanted to get larger amounts and different kinds of it, I did go to Arizona to do so. But, you can even put, how a stethoscope looks where basically the doctor puts a stethoscope. Well, they have ozone that can go through there. So it can go through your ears and can go into your sinus passage as well, which is awesome because a lot of chronic disease patients, including Lyme, including cancer, have mold toxicity. And a lot of the mold gets stuck in the sinuses. And even people who have chronic sinus infections, let's say it's not mold, they usually it's a very closed space, your sinuses. So if you can get that ozone through there and into that whole passage, it's great to kill off any fungus, because you'll hear a lot of times of sinus infections and they're not being resolved and people are getting tons of antibiotics when in fact, let's say it's a fungus. So obviously the antibiotic won't do anything.
Right.
So there's all different types. So there's not just the blood one.
Got it. And then so would you get that from a naturopathic doctor, or where would you even find such a?
So my personal naturopathic doctor who I used in Arizona, he has a center in Scottsdale. It's called American Center for Biological Medicine, ACBM. He has that. He has blood ozone there. And then he also has the ear cannula, the one with the ear ozone. And then I have another colleague. She's also in Scottsdale. She is at I can tell you the name after. I can't remember the exact name, but she has another center. So if anyone needs to contact me for people in Arizona, I'm happy to help with, setting you up with the right people, because I have really great trusted people out there who do it.
Yeah. And then would a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, would that offer similar benefits?
So I think it's different, to be honest. I've never got into, I know it's great for you, but I think it's a different mechanism of action. And I can't speak to it exactly because I haven't done enough research exactly physiologically what it is doing, but I believe it's a little bit different because this is literally going into your blood.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I would imagine it's much more effective that way.
Yeah.
But I know, hyperbaric oxygen chambers are used for burn victims, so they'll have them in the hospital, but then they'll also, like athletes and things will use them, or people with immune conditions will use them.
Exactly. And which, if you have the financial means, all of these alternative therapies are wonderful to add to your already current nutrition and supplement regimen. Absolutely.
Right. All right, let's talk about homeopathy. So what exactly is that, and what would you use that for?
So homeopathy is something that a lot of people can't wrap their head around. So I'm going to try to speak in layman's terms as much as possible to make it at least understandable. So have you ever gone to the health food store and seen those boron, BOIRON, and they're these big stands and they have these little remedies?
Yes, I have a couple on my desk right now, actually, thanks to you.
I know, we're both showing each other our remedies. Exactly. So basically what they have done for the general public was to take the biggest thing that remedy can help you with, and they'll write it on the label. Now, it does a disservice because there's so many other things that those remedies can help. So people don't know that. So they only read what's on the bottle. But they put that one symptom because it's basically the one symptom that is one of the most common. But just first off, there can be thousands of different symptoms that a remedy can help you with, even though it's not listed on the label. Does that make sense? So that's the first thing. Because I have patients say to me all the time, it says headache on my bottle, but I have a stomach ache. I'm like, I know, because you can literally give a remedy and it can cover other symptoms other than that. So that's the first thing. So if you ever were prescribed one from a practitioner, know that there's other symptoms.
And I think that's just an interesting thing to note, is that in conventional medicine, typically a medicine is only going to do one thing. It's only going to treat the stomach ache. It's only going to treat the headache, right? It's going to have a million side effects that you don't want, but it only does one thing. So that's why I think it's sometimes hard for people to get their head around just one food or one remedy being able to treat a wide variety of things.
Right. Because they're like, okay, what is this? It says headache, but I have this thing, and then they don't understand. So I have to be very thorough. And this is why patient education is really important, because I have to explain this to them, because otherwise, if they go home and they don't understand, they don't feel empowered. They don't know what they're doing and why. So that's even on my treatment sheet. I will write what they're getting this for. Why are they taking it? So that they're not just saying, oh yeah, Dr. Susan told me to take it. They actually understand. So that's the best way to explain that. So going back to what it actually is. So in each one of these remedies, if you notice, so Maria, if you look on your bottle, does it say 30C?
Yes.
Yeah, so those are different potencies. So homeopathic remedy basically is that there's certain substances from the earth, right? So which remedy do you have in front of you?
I have the silica.
Okay, so silica, right? So they would take, let's just say silica from the earth, which is a mineral. And what homeopathy is, it's basically diluted versions of a natural substance. So this is different than herbal medicine. So we could talk about that later if we have time, but that's different. So it's diluted. So that's 30C. That meant that was diluted 30 times. So now people say, well, how is it effective if it's diluted? So that's the coolest part about homeopathy. The more diluted it is, the more potent the medicine is, which is really cool. So it's a form of energetic medicine. And it was discovered by a doctor called Samuel Hahnemann back years and years ago. And he came up with a theory that like attracts like, which we can wrap our head around that, right? Like attracts like, right? So what he did was he decided to give a bunch of healthy people certain homeopathic remedies. And then he wanted to see what symptoms they got. So let's just say they gave someone silica and that person got a problem with their eye or a blocked oil gland, for example. He would write down all the symptoms that a healthy person would get. So now if he had a patient who had that symptom of, let's say, an eye issue or something growing out of the skin or a blocked oil gland, etc., he would give that remedy. So you give basically the remedy of that symptom because like attracts like. So another really good take-home way to understand this is if you were to, so Maria, if I gave you an onion and I told you to cut it, what symptoms would you get from cutting an onion and being right in an onion?
Your eyes would burn and your nose would run.
Exactly. So now let's just say you came to my office with a runny nose and burning eyes and tearing eyes. I would give you homeopathic onion.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So cool, right?
Yeah.
So you're basically, because that is actually what it cures. So like attracts like and cures the case. Now, it's hard to prescribe a homeopathic remedy sometimes because you have to get exact symptoms. So if I were to prescribe somebody, I just prescribed someone the other day a remedy called Ignatia. She has severe anxiety. She constantly takes big sighs, like she's always breathing in deep. She lost a loved one recently. She has certain GI symptoms that fit that remedy. Now, I gave that to her. If you were to give that to your friend who also had a stomach ache, it wouldn't work because it was literally picked for the patient because of the certain characteristics that she presented with. So unless the patient comes with very specific characteristics, and the more unique and weird, the better, because that's the way you can find the remedy. So a lot of times in my first visit, unless it's like blatant to me, I don't give a remedy right away. I kind of get to know the person. I kind of keep thinking, okay, what's the remedy? And then eventually I'll give the remedy. Sometimes on the first visit, I'll know it right away. But it's hard because there's thousands of remedies and you have to pick the one that fits the exact symptoms. And so the best part about it is it's like $8. So if it doesn't work, it's $8. And if it does, you just had $8 that helped you feel significantly better. And then the last thing about homeopathy is, what is it really doing? It's helping. It's like almost like a pendulum that keeps swinging back and forth. Let's say you're out of balance. It basically helps you reach balance. And it promotes immunity and it promotes your body being basically in that healing state. It basically just puts you back into balance. And so this has been a huge part of my practice because it will affect not only physical symptoms, but it will have mental symptoms in mind. So if a person has, let's say, 4 different types of physical ailments, but then they also have 4 different types of emotional ailments, I would find the remedy that would encompass that whole person.
Got it. Yeah, so interesting. And now, how are they different from herbal medicine or botanical medicine?
So these are diluted, whereas herbal medicine, if you notice, if you were to go to the health food store, you ever see the tincture bottles, those little glass bottles with the dropper tops on top?
Yes.
Those are like herbs. So those are just plant medicine, which you're using, most of the time you're using a lot of plant medicine with homeopathy, but they're diluted. In this situation, they're usually not diluted. They're usually either dried and put in a capsule or they're used in an herbal tincture. And so those are straight herbs. So for example, you've heard of echinacea or milk thistle, right? These are common ones that people have heard of. You can just take those straight herbs and they have certain indications. Anyone can take them to help, let's just say, if someone wanted to boost their immune system, that's a quality of echinacea. Or if someone wants They have, I would, if they have like a cold or flu and they have, let's say, a URI and upper respiratory infection, I would give golden seal, right? That basically helps. It's an antimicrobial. So it's more generalized, the homeopathy that is more specific to you.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So the homeopathy is very personalized, where the herbal medicine is a little bit more general.
It's a little more general, but you have to also keep in mind you personalize which herb they need. So I'm like, okay, does Maria need this herb or does she need this herb? So everything is still personalized. However, it's more easy for the general public to just pick, let's just say, oh, I want some liver support, so I'm going to go get some milk thistle.
Right. Yeah. So is it okay, do you think, in your mind, or is it safe for people, because they do sell them at Whole Foods, to go and read, okay, the silica is good for this. Let me pick up that homeopathic recipe or remedy.
Yeah.
And, there's an immune support tincture, let me get that. Like, is that fine for people to kind of do?
Yes, I think it's fine. So if, let's just say the remedy has one, so I have a remedy in front of me that says headache or post-nasal drip. It might help your headache or it may not, because there's a few different, like this type of headache is a certain presentation of the headache. So the only thing is it just may not work. It may work. There's some, for example, a really good one that is over the counter. I'm sure you've heard of Arnica.
Yes.
So you could put Arnica on topically, but Arnica is a homeopathic remedy. You can get Arnica in a homeopathic to take the pellets, like in the little bottles that you find. And that will be wonderful for if you just got done with, let's say you just had a trauma or fall, you just fell, you just had some surgery, et cetera, et cetera. That's a great remedy that someone can just go pick up. And all of the other remedies that they have there, you can try if there's your one symptom there. But most of the times it may relieve something temporarily. But if you're not working on the whole cause, it may not be as effective. But it's still better than nothing if it works.
Right.
And then the immune tincture, yeah, absolutely. Those are pretty safe. Like any of those type of tinctures. The only things I get nervous about people doing when they don't know what they're doing is like methylated B vitamins, taking too much Bs, detoxing stuff. I had a girl do her own detox, and she had a full-blown panic attack that she couldn't get out of for a week. So that's where I'm a little bit more wary. But most of the things can be pretty safe. It's just a matter of how effective they are because you're picking them and someone's not picking them for you of what you need.
Right. So maybe like during the cold and flu season, if you need a little immune boost, okay, fine, go for it. I remember I used to actually work at Integrative Nutrition while I was doing the course, and there was oil of oregano everywhere during the winter time.
Yes, and that's great. Like that's another general one. Like everyone, like keep some Quiddle silver, oil of oregano, elderberry. Like those are great for cold and flu. Vitamin C. Those are great for you to empower yourself and have available, like to boost immune system, colds and flus. Absolutely. But then there's another thing. Like let's say you take too much oil of oregano and you have candida, you might go into a complete flare. So you just have to know certain things and don't kind of be gentle when you're using things that aren't recommended by a practitioner. Just be a little bit less aggressive.
Yeah, and I think with these things, a little bit goes a long way. And, I think we're so used to like, we want more, we want it to be more effective. So we want to, drink the whole bottle of oil of oregano, which you definitely do not want to do.
Oh my God. That tastes like, first of all, you smell like an Italian kitchen and you can't go around anyone for at least the day. And then it literally burns your entire, like you literally take a drop or two and like not a dropper, like a drop or two, or maybe three the most, and that's it. Like,
yeah, that's all you need. Yeah, and it burns. Yeah,
it burns so bad.
Oh man, the good old days back at IAN.
Exactly.
Okay, what about? Let's talk about hydrotherapy. So, what exactly is that, and when would you use that?
So, hydrotherapy is hydro is water, so it's water therapy. It's very, very effective and it's cheap because you're using water and you can do it anywhere, right? So there are all different forms of hydrotherapy. I actually give my patients an at-home hydrotherapy handout for them to do at least a few of these a week. So why are they so important is that when you're usually using obviously two types of temperature, hot and cold. It's basically how you used to see people just jumping in from a hot pool to a cold pool, right? Or a hot tub to a regular pool. And what it does is the heat vasodilates all your arteries. And then what does cold do? It constricts, right? So it constricts everything. So it's really great to detox, move blood, increase circulation. It basically can help increase some of your immune cells. So what you can do, and there's a few different ways you can do it. One of my favorite ways when you have an issue, let's just say you have a sinus infection. So what you can do is you can take a hot washcloth or two washcloths, one that you either put under hot water or maybe put in the microwave with water, and then another one that you have in like a little ice bucket or under cold water. And you can alternate hot and cold. So you can literally lay a hot compress. You always start with hot, right? Because you're vasodilating the arteries. And then you're opening it all up, and then you're going to put the cold. So one of my favorite ways is to do is about like 1.5 minutes of hot to 30 seconds of cold. And you always alternate that 3 times, and you always end on cold because you want to end on the constriction because you want to push everything out. You could do this over your ears if you have an ear infection, sinus infection. You can do this over, let's say you have really bad pain in your back. You could do contrast hydrotherapy. You can put the hot on for a little longer, the cold on for a little longer. You could do 3 minutes hot and then 1.5 minutes cold. Another really cool way, and this is great for cold and flu season coming up, is something called magic socks or wet socks. Have you ever heard of this?
I have not.
So this is so cool, and it's great for babies too. So what you do is you wet a pair of cotton socks, and then you wring out the socks very, very, very well. You don't want them dripping. And so usually you do it with cold water. Sometimes they tell you to put the socks in the freezer, but you don't have to do that. You could just put them under really cold water. And then it sounds really horrible, but it's really not as bad as it sounds. And it's really effective. You basically put the cold socks on before bed, and then you put on about 2 pair of really heavy socks. So preferably wool because they keep heat in. And what happens is you go to bed. And what does your body have to do? Because you have cold, wet feet now. So the body's like, this is not right. I have to warm up the feet because we don't want a cold, wet feet. So the body has to increase its internal temperature. And when it increases its internal temperature, it kills things, right? So if we have colds, flus, even if we have viruses, even when you're not sick, anything that any microbes that you want to kill, anytime you're increasing the internal temperature, which is why a fever is so effective. So during the night, all of this will be happening. You won't even be knowing it. And then when you wake up, your socks will be dry. And so this is a great way if you have any type of sinus infection, ear infection, or any type of upper respiratory issue, it helps pull stuff down and circulates it. And it's also great for just like you do it as a weekly detox. You could do it as a daily detox. The only thing that might happen is you might feel a little detox, like overly detox. Some people don't feel it all, but let's just say, you had a lot of toxins to move. You might just get those detoxy symptoms like fatigue or, like lethargy, just feeling like under the weather a little bit, maybe a headache. And if that's the case, you don't do it every night, but it's great for cold and flu season, and it's also great just like for detox. So these are just some of the ways you can use hydrotherapy.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I've never really come across, I mean, I think everyone knows like hot compresses, right? And things like that.
Yeah.
But like doing the hot and the cold,
Yes.
That was new. And then the magic socks is new. I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah, it's so cool. And then also in Arizona, and there's no one does this here on the East Coast, except for my friend who lives in Saratoga. We do something called constitutional hydrotherapy, where we make a whole treatment out of it. You come to the office. But I was actually in medical school. I was a student doctor on the hydrotherapy shift. Someone would come in. We'd put them on a massage bed. We'd put hot towels. They would basically undress from the waist up. We'd put hot towels on their belly. We'd wrap them up in a wool blanket, let them relax with some beautiful music on. Then we come in and then we put cold on a towel. We wrap them up again. And then we flip them over and we do the same thing. And people would come in at least 2 to 3 times a week for this. And it would really be so, so helpful for any type of chronic disease, especially autoimmunity, because I can't remember the exact number, but it raises your white blood cells by a significant amount each treatment. And it also puts you into parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest. And this is where we heal, right? So it's helpful for the nervous system. So you can even do this at home. It's harder to do it at home other than having someone do it to you. But there's easier ways like wet socks that are still effective, but that's like the head honcho of hydrotherapy. No one really does it in New York, but you can try to figure out how to do it on yourself, or if you're ever on the West Coast, it's a lot more popular there.
Or could you do a hot and cold shower, alternating that?
Yes, so that's a great question. So every patient's treatment sheet, I always put that they either going to they're going to turn their shower to cool. So people hear me and they roll their eyes when I say cool because they do not want to do that. But you don't have to blast yourself with cold. You can just every day, even if it's 10 seconds, just go to cool at the end of the shower. And then you want to aim up to 30 seconds. It does not have to be freezing. It can be cool. And then you can end your shower with a cool 30-second spray. Or you can do alternating. My mentor always says, play with your shower knobs, just to get the back and forth, back and forth. So these are all forms and they're free, right? As long as you have towels and water,
right.
Or sometimes just water.
Right. So I want to just circle back to something you mentioned earlier, because this is something I think that people don't understand or know is about a fever. So when you get a fever, traditionally, your mom or the doctor, they immediately try and get your fever down, right?
Yes.
Why is that a bad idea?
That is a horrible idea. The reason for that is the fever is a mechanism by your body to heal and to kill off whatever is making you sick. So if you have a fever, you want to actually optimize that fever so that you are killing off the very organisms that are making you so miserable to begin with. If you use a fever suppressant like a Tylenol or an Advil, you reduce the fever, you feel more comfortable, but the body didn't basically heat up and kill the pathogen making you sick. So a lot of times, a lot of the Tylenols and these fever suppressants, what they do, and in naturopathic medicine, we actually say it pushes the disease further into the body because you're not addressing it. So it's the same concept of using a steroid on eczema, right? It's like you're pushing it under the rug. It's the same thing as you have this pathogen that didn't really get to be dealt with. You might feel more comfortable because you just feel miserable with the fever. However, with fevers, what I usually have people do is, to at least feel more comfortable is, using a cool compress, going into like a tepid type bath to help bring, going under covers, trying to break the fever. That's more, I use also homeopathic remedies to optimize the fever. So when they do have a fever, make it really effective so they can get it over with. And homeopathy is also really awesome for fevers. So you'll see in the health food store, you'll see fever on a few of them. But again, you don't know if it's going to work. If it's, you could try. But usually, let's just say a fever comes on and it's sudden and it's this and it has this quality, I would give this remedy. And then, I remember doing that this past winter. My boyfriend got extremely sick. He had like 103 fever, and his family comes from typical, medical, allopathic, Western medicine. They're both nurses. They were insisting he take an antibiotic, but if he was under my care, he wasn't going to take one. So I gave him homeopathic remedy. I gave him one that was, for him. And I gave him elderberry, colloidal silver, did the wet socks that night, and did a few other things. And the next day, the fever was basically a 99. And by the next day, it was a 98. And he was better in like 2 days because you're optimizing the fever. You're like fixing it and getting it over with, opposed to then getting potentially sick again because you didn't deal with the pathogen to begin with.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, like I said, I grew up whenever I had a fever, always get the medicine right away to get the fever down. But then when I was in college, I had a friend who grew up in the Dominican Republic, and I had gotten sick and I had a really high fever. I don't remember exactly what it was, but he's like, just wrap yourself in blankets and just burn it out. That's how you do it. Just burn it out. And exactly. And then within a day or two, I don't remember what it was, I was fine. I was back to normal and I had gotten better. But it was just interesting that that's how he was raised or he was taught, is to get under the covers or put the cool compress
Yes.
on your head and let your body, he actually, that's what he was saying, is like, let your body burn it out. I guess kind of instinctively knowing that that was your body's reaction to fighting
Right.
something off versus, go take a pill that's going to lower your body's ability
Right.
to fight off the pathogen.
Exactly. And then the only time you want to be, and this is important to note, you want to be really cautious. If someone has a fever that's like 104, I mean, that's dangerous. Go to the emergency room.
Right.
A baby, there are babies that have fevers 103 and they're like 1 or 2 years old. And as long as you really watch the baby and keep giving it homeopathy and watch it and watch it and watch it, there's ones, we don't give them anything sometimes too. But if the baby's like under 6 months and they have a fever of like 103, 104, you're going to the emergency room. But like most of us are not having fevers that are adults,
that high.
Right. Like a 103, kind of many adults can get up to like a 103. You feel horrible and you feel delirious, but it's not as dangerous if it was going up to those like 104, 105 ranges where you're like, okay, I might have meningitis.
Right. So yeah, if it's a normal fever, you could probably treat it naturally yourself. If you are over 103, 104, then you probably want to go to a doctor.
Yeah, exactly. Just to check out what the heck is going on. Absolutely. Especially if it's lasting a long time too. You're like, okay, what's really going on here?
Right. So let's talk detoxing for a sec, because that came up a few times. And in traditional medicine, they'll usually say, you don't need to detox. Our body already has natural detox organs and it does it for you. And that detoxing is, woo-woo fake stuff. Mm-hmm. What is your response to that?
So the first thing I always think is we don't live in a time where our elders, our grandparents lived, where things weren't as toxic. So that's first and foremost. We live in a very different society. I know, Maria and I live in New York City. I mean, there's tons of pollution. We're breathing in car exhaust, living in buildings. Is there mold? Is there what's in the air? What are we breathing? We go into a nail salon to do our nails. We're breathing in that. That's more toxicity. We get food prepared to us in a plastic container. Now we have more endocrine disruption. So that's first and foremost. We're more toxic today than we were a century ago. So that's really important to note. Second is detoxing isn't a special thing, because our body does it every single day. If we didn't, we would be dead. So our liver and our kidneys and our GI tract are detoxing every day. The problem is, because of the overload of toxins from our food, and now there's this whole thing with the genetically modified foods and glyphosate on our, foods. This is a huge reason why we need to facilitate our own body's mechanism to get out extra stuff that it may not be able to get out because it's overburdened. So that's basically the big thing here. It's the overburden of these toxins. It's like the cup that fills over. So it's, people can call it woo-woo, but we live in, a lot of people are not eating like you or I, where we're very conscious of the food that we're eating. Or let's just say people are health conscious. They may not know the type of toxicity that's in their food, right? They might be wanting to do the best for themselves and they just don't know. So that's what I have to say about that. It's a part of life, but we're overburdened.
Right. And I think, beyond just food, that there's also, like you mentioned, the car exhaust, the scented candle that's on your desk, the air freshener. When I go into an Uber and they have that stupid air freshener, I hold my breath for the whole
I know. I tell them to take it out.
Oh my God. It's so
I make
bad.
Them put the glove compartment. I can't even breathe. I get a migraine.
So do I. I get a migraine instantly. And I was like, I don't know if that's because I really don't use chemicals. Like, everything's really natural in my house now for so long that I'm more sensitive than before. But I get a headache immediately when I am in a car that has an air freshener.
And it could be because, let's just say we do have cleaner things in the house. Another thing that's important for people to know, some people have multiple chemical sensitivity, and that usually means that their detox pathways may not be open. So you might be having a daily bowel movement, but it doesn't mean that everything's coming out. right? It doesn't mean that your liver is effective. So that's important. Like, let's just say you go through, and I can relate to that. I have the same, but I had to find the cause of what was causing me to be so irritated. Mine was Lyme. I mean, your nerves and neurological Lyme, you're just very sensitive to toxins and you can't detox properly, right? So you go near a smell and you're like, what is this? And then some people could just be so healthy that they breathe a smell and it just doesn't sit right with them. They just feel sick by it, especially because they're so toxic, those fumes that we're breathing in with, the candles or the air fresheners, but they're everywhere. I mean, there's scents everywhere. What about laundry detergent? What are they called? The dryer sheets.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so many things now that we don't, unless you are sitting down with the professional, like telling you, I tell my patients all the time, like, okay, don't bring your dry cleaning into your house. There's all those fumes, like take the plastic off before, and their brain explodes a little bit because you don't think of these things. So that's why it's so important to detox, because we're just overburdened.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't even think about that with the dry cleaning. I use an organic dry cleaner, although I don't know how green that actually is.
It's better. It's better. Like, the organic dry cleaners are better. I just to not chance it. I always tell them take it off before, but it's another, bringing those toxins in. You know what I mean? It just like doesn't end.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so much to think about. And then I think another thing people don't realize is that certain foods, they either help our body detox or they don't, right? Like if you think about cruciferous vegetables, for example, those are going to help our body perform its detoxification processes. And when we're not eating a nutrient-rich diet, we're not giving our body the nutrients it needs to perform its natural functions, then it's not going to,
Everyone's, and most of the people I see are very malnourished. So they're not eating either. So, some people are not even eating breakfast and then barely eat dinner and then eat this. I mean, a lot of people are already malnourished. And then when they are eating, may not be making the best choices because they don't know what choices to make. So it's really important for people to detox, but you have to be safe about it. So you can go and eat cruciferous vegetables. That's safe. You can drink lemon water. That's safe. You can get green juices. That's pretty safe. But when you're doing an intense detox, you want to make sure that someone's watching over you, because like I just said, I had a girl the other day, she had a panic attack that, wouldn't reside for more than, after 4 or 5 days from detoxing because her body just wasn't ready for it. Especially if you're living like a standard American diet and then you just go into this detox. It's very dangerous.
And was she like taking some sort of supplements or something for that?
All she was taking was a protein powder that was a really good brand by something I would recommend to people, but she has methylation issues. So now she's getting too much B vitamins in, and she basically had a crisis, because if you have a methylation defect and you're taking in now methylated vitamins in the amount that she was taking, and it wasn't even that much, she's just sensitive. So you have to just know. And then she didn't know. And then she got so panicked because that's scary. So some people don't, one woman, I told her, I don't ever detox anyone until they're with me at least a month or 2. And I start them with general supplements that are detoxing in nature just by taking a good multi, a fish oil, some probiotic. Those are giving your body what it needs, which helps to detox you. So we are detoxing, but not like heavy. And I had someone convince me, and I'll never do this again. She convinced me to detox faster than I'd like. And she had a crisis. She was, her mood got so bad. She had literally, she felt like she was in crisis. So, some people are sensitive, and that's the point of what I'm saying. Not to say you shouldn't detox, just do it safely.
Right. So if you want to do it on your own, you can start by getting rid of some of the chemicals in your house and the scented candles and the air fresheners and all of that stuff. You could use essential oils and they have that little humidifier or whatever it's called, vaporizer for the essential oils if you want it to smell nice. Your personal care products. Taking those chemicals out and then adding in cruciferous vegetables, your daily greens, that kind of stuff. Yes. That you should be able to do without any issues whatsoever. And then if you really feel like you're on a standard American diet and you want to go a little bit deeper, then that's when it's the time to really work with someone to walk you through that.
Yeah, just to make sure it's safe, because you don't want to come from a diet of very poor food and then go to, some people do a juice cleanse. And I think that's actually a horrible idea for people in New York City, because we're very stressed here. So now detoxing is already a stress on the body a little bit when you're kind of pushing it, right? So now people here don't sleep enough, are overly stressed with really time consuming and distressful jobs. And then some people want to do a juice cleanse with no adrenals. They have no adrenal capacity left, and then they feel horrible. So I always say, like, if you're going to do something that radical, you go to like an actual retreat. If you want to add green juices into your diet, great. Add them into your diet, but with food. Do you know what I mean? Not with
Right.
like just sitting there drinking green juice all day with 5 hours of sleep and a toxic job. We're not going to get a good outcome.
Right. Right.
At
Yeah.
all.
No, I'm definitely a proponent of using food to detox and actually eating. If you just change the foods that you're eating, that makes a
Yes.
huge difference. You don't have to do anything extreme. You don't have to juice fast. You don't have to water fast, even unless you have a specific issue, that you're trying to treat under care. You can do something a little bit more extreme, but on your own, eat healthy foods,
Right.
cut out the garbage, and that really will make a big difference in
Exactly.
and of itself.
Cut out the garbage. Exactly. And then if, let's just say, a patient were to come to me, I would give them gentle detoxes throughout our program so that they're constantly draining toxins out and we're cleaning out every organ system. And that's just a part of the treatment. But for yourself, absolutely. Like, take out the garbage is one of the most important ways to just utilize a good, healthy detox.
Right. All right. So, last question that I love to ask everyone is, if you can just leave our listeners with just one tip or one piece of advice on how to live a happier and healthier life, what would that be?
Listen to your body. And I always say, honor your body. And I feel like once you do that, you will make better choices. Because if you really listen to what you need, if I need rest, if I need really good, nourishing food, if I need TLC, you end up giving yourself what you really need. And I feel a lot of us are so deficient in some of these basic self-care needs. And I feel like if we would just sit back and listen to our bodies and see what it's telling us and what symptoms are coming up and how we can alleviate, I feel like we would feel so much happier and more in tune with ourselves because we're finally listening and we're kind of not ignoring these really important signals that are coming to our body. And I feel like that really promotes us to take better care of ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. That's something I always say as well, is that you really need to listen to your body and make decisions based on that. I think what sometimes could be confusing for people is that sometimes they're like, oh, my body wants a Snickers, or, or like things like that. So I think in the beginning, or we're just not used to,
Right.
We're not used to thinking like, oh, if I have a headache, or, oh, if I have a rash or something, that it could be our body's way of telling us we need something. Like, we don't know how to interpret that. So I think it takes a little bit of time to really start to listen to your body and understand your body and get past the, I need the vending machine right now, and like get to deeper, like, what do you actually need?
Right. I was just going to say, like, challenge yourself. If you say you want a Snickers, well, first, if you're a woman, ask if you're on your menses. That's number one. Challenge you to think, okay, what can I do that, okay, I'm really craving sweet right now. Did I not eat enough? Or did I not, let's say, eat enough at the last meal? Did I not sleep enough? Like, just challenge yourself to ask yourself maybe why you're feeling this way instead of, indulging in things that, we all know intrinsically what's good for us. I mean, we have really amazing health coaches and naturopaths and doctors to lead us. But at the end of the day, we know that Snickers is not good. We know that vegetables are good for us. So I think it's like intrinsically getting really in touch with yourself and being like, okay, why am I making these decisions? And am I self-sabotaging? And where is this coming from? Is there some deep-rooted issue, that I have with these type of things? But, we all know what's healthy for us intrinsically, right?
Yeah, no, I love that. That's great advice to really ask yourself and dig a little deeper.
Right.
So, well, thank you so much for being here. If people want to connect with you, where are the best places for them to find you?
So my website is naturallysue.com, Naturally Sue, SUE.com. I also have an Instagram page, dr.susanc, so dr.susanc. And then all of my contact information will be on the website or on Instagram. I really try to put healthy food that I make, things that I learned from my patients. I try to always share so I can, get the information to the general public. So I try to share as much knowledge on there as much as possible. And then every time I post on Instagram, it will go on to Facebook and Twitter, which I believe my name there is Dr. Susan Cucchiara on Facebook.
Yeah, and I love your Instagram. I love your Instagram stories.
Ah,
So,
thank you.
yes.
Thank you so much. I know, so do I. I love yours. That's why when I met Maria, I was like, oh my God, we're like the same person. We have like the same stuff. It's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you next week.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.